I'm Rich Andreski, Bureau Chief for Public Transportation at the Connecticut Department of Transportation. And I'd like to welcome you to Along the Lines, a podcast series where we'll explore current issues and ideas on Connecticut's public transportation system. Welcome to another episode of Along the Lines. In this special two-part episode, we're going to discuss rail travel in Connecticut, what we can expect in the future, and provide updates on projects that will improve our customers' experience on our robust rail network. Let's face it, rail travel across the nation got hit hard with COVID. With widespread adoption of telework and fewer people traveling due to the pandemic, ridership on our rail system dropped by over 90%. Before the pandemic, the New Haven line, operated by Metro North, had served more than 38 million riders annually, and it was the busiest commuter rail line in the country. And with over 230 miles of tracks, the CT Rail system, which also includes CT Rail Shoreline East and CT Rail Hartford line, is the backbone of Connecticut's transportation system. Those two rail lines alone served more than 1 million passengers in 2019. But throughout this past year, ridership was a fraction of that total. However, we are proud that our rail system kept running and continued to serve essential workers and those who relied on the service during the pandemic. Now we finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. Rail ridership is beginning to bounce back. Connecticut is also one of the leaders in getting its population vaccinated. So as Connecticut reopens, we are ready to serve our passengers who want to get back to moving about our great state. For this very special two-part episode, we're ready to ask the big question. What now? What changes have we seen, and will rail see its resurgence? Today, I'm joined by two guests who know a little something about the subject, and we'll hear from them and their thoughts on the future of rail ridership in Connecticut. So it's my pleasure to introduce Rich Jankovich. Rich has 29 years of experience with the Connecticut DOT, serving as Assistant Rail Administrator from 2010 until his promotion to Rail Administrator in July 2020. Rich leads Connecticut's Office of Rail, which is responsible for managing and developing the state's passenger and freight rail system. He serves as Connecticut's representative to the AASHTO Council on Rail Transportation, the States for Passenger Rail Coalition, and Amtrak Intercity Passenger Rail Committee, among other national and regional organizations working to improve passenger rail transportation. Great to have you on the program, Rich.
Good morning, Rich, and thank you, and hello to everybody. And I look forward to today in this conversation and your other guests and having a great discussion on the topics.
Thanks so much. And my other guest joining me today is Jim Gildea. Jim is the chairman of the Connecticut Commuter Rail Council, and he is a passionate user and advocate and a regular commuter on the Waterbury line. In addition, Jim is director of manufacturing at Bigelow Tea, chairman of the Derby Board of Education. He serves on the board of directors for Manufacture CT, Bridgeport Regional Business Council, and also he serves as the vice chair of the Derby Historical Society. Welcome to the podcast, Jim.
Nice to be here, Rich. Looking forward to talking today.
So this is an exciting topic, one that is a bit of a parlor game for many people, thinking about really what will the future hold for public transportation and rail in particular. So let's start, Jim, I think with you, because you've got the perspective of the commuters at the heart of your organization, the Commuter Rail Council. You know, we discussed the council on the prior programs and rider advocacy, but can you tell our listeners about your role in the council and some of the important work that it does?
So yes, I am chair of the Connecticut Commuter Rail Council, which is a statewide advocacy group for rail commuters, appointed by various legislative leaders and the governor's office. I think what's neat about the council is that they are, in fact, commuters, and so they have a day-to-day perspective. And while I think the Department of Transportation and all of the service providers do a really nice job, at the end of the day, the folks on the council are day-to-day in the trench commuters, and I think that's important. And I think that really helps from an advocacy perspective because we do see issues up front. I would say a few of the wins I think we've had, are as small as, drawing attention to, broken shelters at a train station, to something as big as, really advocating and pushing for maintenance at the Stanford Train Center and getting things like the deck sealed and the water damage, addressed. And I think perhaps one of the biggest wins really too is playing a small role in each of these things. It's just a small role that we play for really a lot of the work that's being done in the Waterbury branch line. The passing sidings, the additional service, that was just continued advocacy. And so I do think we are able to play a small role in some small issues all the way up to big issues.
Jim, thanks for that. Your role is well known. I watched you pull this organization together, and one of the interesting ways you've approached this is to move around the state and really hold meetings throughout the state prior to the pandemic, and then virtually during the pandemic. So, for those that don't know, maybe about your organization, how would they get involved if they wanted to get involved with the Commuter Rail Council?
And it's really a great, relevant, timely question because we actually have had a few vacancies recently. So we are not at full force now. And so I would tell people that if you are someone who is interested in rail, if you're a commuter, if you're someone who wants to advocate for your line or for the branches that you use, by all means, please visit us at our website, ctcommuterrailcouncil.org, and hit the contact us button, or you could email me directly at ctrailcouncil@gmail.com. And again, we have real tangible vacancies right now that we're looking to fill.
Thank you. And I would encourage our listeners to check out the website and consider getting involved. The Connecticut DOT, while we are charged with implementing the programs, rail programs, we do listen and need the input of our riders. And there's no better way to provide that input than the Commuter Rail Council. So thank you for that, Jim.
And if I could just add one last thing, I think you really hit the nail on the head, is for those commuters who maybe feel they won't make a difference or they can't make a difference. I will say that our service providers and the Department of Transportation have certainly made themselves available to us. And I do sincerely feel that when given suggestions that certainly make sense and they're justifiable, I really feel that our relationship has really evolved into one where they listen, they try to accommodate, and they hear what we're saying as commuters.
I would agree wholeheartedly. And I know you have a partner in crime, so to speak, when Rich Jankovich. Rich and you, I know, go back quite some time. So, Rich, just pivot to you for a moment. You are charged, for the listeners that may not know our DOT titles, Rail Administrator is the top official at the DOT in charge of the rail system. Not a small job by any means. And so, Rich, as you think about the pandemic and the impact that it's had on our ridership, and we're seeing that residents are getting vaccinated, businesses are reopening, employers are beginning reopening. What are you seeing on the rails recently?
Thanks, Rich. A couple of things we're seeing is the return of the commuters and the leisure travelers are coming back. It's been a slow and gradual return, but it's been growth. And so from the worst of the impacts to now, we've seen this increase in ridership. More evidently is on the weekends, folks are starting to get out. So very positive signs. Folks are wanting to get back on the trains and return. Myself and staff have been out, traveling on the trains, taking notes and observations to report back on what we're seeing. But it's been trips recently that I've seen more and more folks wanting to get back to what they used in the past, which was a very dynamic railroad out there. In addition to what we've seen on the trains, it's also at some of our commuter lots up and down the lines that we've seen folks starting to, again, return, park, and make their trips. So the first thing I'd like to say to that, Rich, is it's been very encouraging. The second, and it's most evident, is that our service providers reaching out to the customers, being friendly, addressing the questions that they have on the trains, and giving the passengers a comfort that it is a safe operating railroad, and that this the situation that we've been dealing with over the last 16 months, as we move forward, to be comfortable about the environment they're in, that the trains are clean. If they need a mask and they would like a mask, we would provide it. And can't say enough about all the service providers and our staff at the department really trying to get folks back on the railroad. And lastly, back in March, Charter Communication opened up their headquarters in Stamford. And so we're very excited about what that means, not only at Stamford, but folks up and down the line taking the train to work. So we're really excited about the return. News keeps coming out every week, very positive, and we look forward to addressing that.
You know, Rich, you're a modest kind of guy, as I've known you over the years, and I'm going to give you a plug here. That I know when the pandemic started, your focus was on making sure those trains were safe, that we had ample room for social distancing. I know that you and your team have been watching ridership very closely, and one of the lessons that we learned, an eye opener for me personally, was that air is exchanged rather frequently on those rail cars. Is it every 6 minutes? Is that correct?
That is correct. And we actually underwent a joint effort of evaluating that last summer with some partners, including Yale and Metro North. And we've learned and have taken that information to see and understand that there's very good airflow in the rail cars based on the systems that have been designed with these new M8s that are in service now, going on 10 years. So very good evaluation and analysis performed by the partners that I mentioned, and looking at the airflow and exchange of air in these cars, again, to reassure customers that there's a good turnover that occurs in these cars.
You know, when we think about transportation modes and we think about the Uber and Lyft services, or we think about air travel, in many cases you're in confined environments. In on an airline, you may be in a row of three seats, elbow to elbow with someone. When we contrast that with riding our rail system, there's very often ample room. We have room to socially, in most cases, to be socially distant. There's the air exchange is great. Every 6 minutes, the entire air of that rail car is exchanged with outside air. So it really is a great way to travel, even during the pandemic. But you know, we're seeing some signs that businesses will be bringing employees back. Maybe not full time, but definitely part time, and that looks like that'll be happening over the summer. So I'd like to just sort of open it up to both of you on this question. Where do you see rail travel? How do you see rail travel evolving over the next year or two? Do you think we will get back to prior pandemic levels, or do we think there'll be a new normal of sorts?
From my perspective, I would jump in and say that it's really an interesting catch-22 when we talk about rail travel, because Connecticut Rides recently provided the council an overview of a study they did. And what was fascinating about rail riders is that it wasn't the safety of the cars that would keep them from coming back. It was a schedule. So for me, I think part of that will involve the schedule, and I certainly understand the issues there, because on the one hand, you don't have ridership to justify scheduling, but on the other hand, the scheduling is something that's keeping people from returning to ridership. So I remain cautiously optimistic that as the state becomes more vaccinated and businesses start to open up, that you will start to see an increase in rail ridership, which will then drive better enhanced scheduling that will then bring people back.
And I'd like to add on to that. And I'd like to look at it from, as you introduced this particular segment, Rich, 1 to 2 years as maybe a short term, long term. So in the short term, we've been looking at various information points that have been from surveys shared with us of what businesses are expecting in New York. And yes, there's going to be this telecommuting going forward, but what we could provide as maybe some opportunities of service in the future, that as folks make decisions to work a couple of days at home and work in their office for their company, that we would be looking at those opportunities. But mostly in the short term, we expect this continual growth, the gradual climb back. And we are excited about that, because as we go through the summer and we get ready to return, as we're hearing more and more around the state, around this region, is that colleges are going to be accepting students back, as well as students going to a lot of the prep schools in person. And those folks that have been doing that as well at home will be going back in not only to work at those locations, but to attend school. And we had a robust program prior to COVID, and we expect that to take off very quickly. So as we go from the shorter term in the next few months to the longer term over this next year and holiday season this fall, I hate to rush through this summer. We're expecting more folks are going to want to get out and travel, and we're going to be there. We're going to provide this service that they expect from us, a reliable and a schedule that will help them get to where they want to go in this new realm of or time frame and work pattern that we're expecting going forward.
Yeah, the way in which people work is changing. I think what we're also hearing is a significant shift in where people live. So we have some friends here in my neighborhood they moved up to Connecticut a few years ago. They're moving back to New Jersey. And we asked them this weekend. We had a first time we had folks out in the backyard since the pandemic, and they were saying that their house was on the market for 3 days. They had 8 offers, and by Sunday night, they listed it on Friday, and by Sunday night they had 8 offers to consider, and the best offer was substantially higher than their asking price. And so this phenomenon, it seems to be playing out across the state right now, where people are moving perhaps from New York City or from other cities, and they're moving to suburban communities here in Connecticut. And the combination, my understanding, I'd like to hear you weigh in on this, both of you, but my understanding is that folks are expecting to be able to telework part of the time. So where a 2-hour commute to New York might have been intolerable in the past, if you only have to do that commute 2 days a week, maybe you can put up with that. So your thoughts, is that a real thing? Do you think that trend will continue?
I do think that the telecommuting trend, or as you referenced earlier, for a portion of the week perhaps is here. I think there will always still be, opportunities and times where you need to be in the office. So I do definitely think that the work environment has changed somewhat. Don't know when we'll come back to 100%, but prior to the pandemic, I mean, the line moved 40 million rides. So if you come back at 50%, that's 20 million rides. I mean, that's a lot, right? And so we still have to be prepared for that. We still have to service those people. There's going to be still, in my opinion, a heck of a lot of people who are going to be on the trains in the near future. And we have to be able to do so safely and efficiently.
Thanks, Jim. How about you, Rich?
Yeah, if I can add to that, in going back to this particular topic and how you introduced it, Rich, about the home sales, and again, we're looking at it as what can we offer outside from the Fairfield County area. Nothing that we're saying that's bad about that, but just can we offer more opportunities of service further out to give folks the opportunity of coming to Connecticut, moving into Connecticut from New York or New Jersey, and want to work a few days a week, but yet be able to get to a train and get into either of the stations in New York or into Stamford, where there's a lot of things going on down in downtown Stamford. So, again, from the Hartford line, the Shore line, and the eastern end of the New Haven line, we are working with our service providers. We're working with a consultant, looking at what's going on out there now and what can we do to introduce some things of the future to address these folks. It's talking about selling houses. My brother sold his house in Clinton last winter, and the person moved up from Virginia and wants to work in New York and plans to take the train a couple of days a week. So right to how you introduced this, Rich, this is the trend right now. And for Connecticut, for us, we seize this and get as many folks to come to Connecticut. There's so much to offer, not only along the shore, but up the lines. I know, Jim, you're up on the Waterbury, and there's so many things to do, not only during the week, but on weekends, that if we can attract more folks to Connecticut and provide services into New York, it's just going to be a tremendous outcome for us here at Connecticut.
And if I could dovetail off of that too, because I think one important point to reference too, as far as intrastate rail, is I don't think it's any surprise that the lines that have been the most successful in returning ridership perspective is the Waterbury branch and the Hartford line, both intrastate lines. So I certainly think that supports the concept that there still is a need to travel intrastate. And I know there's been proposals to expand, let's say the Shoreline East or the Danbury line to Brookfield and New Milford. And so I definitely think one thing the pandemic has showed is that there's still an awful lot of interest in intrastate rail travel as well.
Jim, that's a fantastic segue to sort of the wrap up for part one. This is a two-part episode. We're going to pivot in a moment to the future of rail. But there is no doubt the pandemic has forced us to change how we do business, how we travel. And, we're seeing that in our rail system. It's no exception. So we're going to wrap up part one. Please check out part two and listen as Jim and Rich discuss the many changes in store for the CT rail system. We'll be discussing new rail cars, updated stations, and a faster trip to New York City. I want to thank again our guests, Rich Jankovich and Jim Gildea, for providing their valuable insight. And as a reminder, you can find all episodes of Along the Lines on your favorite podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and SoundCloud. I'm Rich Andreski. Please join us next time for another episode of Along the Lines. Thanks for listening to this episode of Along the Lines. This is your host, Rich Andreski. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please remember to subscribe and share.